Hey there, folks. Welcome to GameSpot's The Lobby, our weekly chat show at 2 p.m. Pacific. Every week we talk about games, games-related topics, and also video games. I'm your host, Chris Waters. The regular cat, Danny O.D., is on some travels, mystery travels to Europe, the continent. Can we describe where it's at?
I think he's already said that he's gone to Poland.
He's in Poland.
Out loud.
Yeah, he's in Poland, so if y'all are up on the Polish development scene, which you really should be, you might know what he's seeing. Before we get into the reason that Kevin VanOrd and Eric Tay are joining me here, I got to tell you guys something. We're giving away a headset. Check it out, Cloud 2 7.1 surround sound headset. We're giving it away today to one of our lucky viewers who's watching this live. So go ahead and reply to GameSpot on Twitter. Tell us you're watching and that you want this bad boy, and you could win it. These are really comfy. Come with like a couple different cups in your ears. It's nice.
I kind of need a
I'll take your word for it.
So
Sounds like you got experience.
Oh, yeah.
Stick this
I know
back
stuff.
here for
Yeah,
later.
we might need that later.
Great. Great.
No? Okay.
Just,
I need
you-
a headset. I need a new headset. I have like 4, but they always seem to break or something goes wrong.
that's
with them.
because you are a monster.
I am a behemoth. It's true.
Kevin VanOrd, this week, Bloodborne is out. The review has like 6,000 comments or something ridiculous right now.
Seriously?
Oh, yeah. They are popping off in those comments, and this is our Ask the Reviewer segment where we talk to you about the Bloodborne review. We've got questions. Eric Tay, you have also beaten Bloodborne.
I did last night, yeah.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
You two Bloodborne champions. First off, let's just go right for the sort of the name, Bloodborne. Doesn't say Souls in it, but
Nope.
it's a Souls game. Is this just like Dark Souls 3 with guns?
You could make that argument, but I would argue that no, it's actually its own.
What
its
argument
own
would
beast.
you make, Kevin?
Well, I mean, first of all, the setting. It's impossible to escape that setting and the change in setting because the Souls games have been set in like medieval dark fantasy land, and now we've got more of it starts off with sort of a Victorian London vibe, you know, a la The Order 1886 or something like that.
So it's like a much more like human environment, like more recently inhabited.
Yeah,
kind
it's
of feeling
still
place?
inhabited for that matter, and that's another one of the interesting things. There are live residents in this place, and you can talk to them through the windows and things like that. They're
Because
all
they never
fearful.
can go outside.
Right. Well, it's
Not safe.
it's the night of the hunt. It's an endless night, and you're responsible for bringing peace and allowing them out of their habitats. They want the church. They're there expecting the church to save the world.
All right, so one of the ways that Bloodborne distinguishes itself, is certainly in the setting, but also the story. Story in the Souls series has always been this very sort of, they just kind of paint it on the walls and like in the item descriptions, it's very non-corporeal. I don't know. It's something you have to like play a lot and sort of build your own idea of. Is there any like plot or character or story to grab onto a little bit more here in Bloodborne?
Yes, Eric.
I mean, like
I don't want to dominate the conversation.
It's fine. Like, I feel like actually you probably would be better to talk about the story only because I found myself, the way I play games is how I got lost in this game was because I didn't pay close enough attention to the story. But I will say,
lost in the game, like disoriented, didn't know where you were going to go, not like totally immersed and lost track of the passage of time.
A little bit of both. I mean, I was so elated from beating the boss, I didn't pay full attention to like a cinematic or something after that kind of gives you hints about what the story is doing and like where you should go next or who you might see next and those kind of little subtle things. The thing is, I didn't play either Dark Souls, but from what I hear, like the story might not have been like the biggest deal. From like I don't know. This is just hearsay from the people that were watching behind me, but it seems like Bloodborne kind of has a story. You're going to figure it all out by the end, and there's twists and there's craziness, but I don't want to do spoilers or anything like that.
Yeah, I mean, Bloodborne is hardly like most modern games or any RPG really when it comes to storytelling. It's still fairly, it doesn't dump a lot of dialogue on you. It's still not loading you up with cutscenes. There's, you're not talking to a bunch of people and getting missions, that kind of thing. But in comparison with the Souls games, it's veritably rich with story. Most of it coming from environmental cues and things like that. And a lot of it, just through sort of the arc that you take. And I'm trying very hard not to give anything away here.
We appreciate your efforts.
I'm not going to spoil anything. But as you go through the world, you start kind of suspecting something, and then it really goes there. Like it's not really subtle in that sense. It has something to say, and it's going to this certain place, and when you first get wind of it, you're like, wait, is this really what this game is doing? And then it's like, oh yeah, this game is not only doing that, but it's really going for it. So, and in the past I just thought of the Souls stories as like a sort of a tapestry that you could pay attention to if you wanted to, but it's sort of more there for atmosphere than anything else. That's sort of how I took it. And so I more or less kind of understood them over time, but I didn't really go for that. This, on the other hand, like, I really want people to hurry up and finish the damn game so I can talk about the story with them.
All right, let's talk about difficulty. That is something that is bandied about all the time when you talk about a Souls game, a Bloodborne game. So let's talk about it first. I want to ask you, Eric, because you have not played a Souls game before. So just sort of generally speaking, on the spectrum of video game difficulty, how hard is this game? What kind of like diligence and perseverance do you need to stick with it?
I mean, it's always relative to the player, of course, but for your average gamer, it might be a little bit harder than your normal game. First of all, it doesn't really hold your hand, right? So it doesn't tell you, go this way, go that way. You have to figure that out yourself. You are going to die a decent amount just learning the game mechanics, the dodge mechanics, trying to time them properly, and that's okay. You have to be okay with that. Like, you have to come to terms with that. Like, that's like almost like the first step, just knowing that you are going to die, you might lose your blood echoes, whatnot. It's okay.
Yeah, failing a bunch, you're not actually failing. That's okay. Keep it up.
Exactly, and like if you persevere long enough, you'll realize that the game is going to work out. Like, you're going to find potential shortcuts, like things that you think are frustrating at first will kind of sort themselves out. And the game does evolve and it gets harder, but it's just like teaching you new things and whatnot, and growing upon the experiences that you've gained through playing the game. So, I mean, it is going to frustrate some people more than others, obviously, but I would just say persevere. I found it really fun. And, like, sometimes, like, I wanted to pull my hair out, but when you beat the boss, when you beat the boss and you finally beat the boss, you feel so good because, some of them are really epic fights, and you're just like, oh, thank God I finally killed him.
The boss of many, many bosses. Kevin, let's place it on a spectrum within its predecessors, its spiritual predecessors, the Souls games.
Sure.
Is Bloodborne the hardest of the bunch yet?
No.
No,
I would say that it's definitely not the hardest of the bunch. I mean, I would say that on the hierarchy, I'm sort of torn on whether Demon Souls or Dark Souls is actually harder.
Okay.
I think they're both tough. I would say probably Demon Souls is probably a little harder than Dark Souls.
All right.
But then I would say Dark Souls 2 is definitely not as hard as Dark Souls.
Okay.
And Bloodborne
so Dark Souls currently at the top. Maybe
and
with
Bloodborne
Souls.
for me was a little bit harder than Dark Souls 2,
a little bit
but
harder.
not as hard as Dark Souls. So I would say the hierarchy
You're messing up.
So the here's how I see the hierarchy.
Yeah, let's count it down.
From the the hardest to the least hard. Demon Souls, Dark Souls, Bloodborne, Dark Souls 2.
All right. Okay. So in terms of, sorry, Eric.
I have a quick question for Kevin, I guess, because I got engaged in this Twitter conversation with like Arthur Geese and Brad Shoemaker about how they felt that, if you had played a Souls game before, like, 1 or 2, tried your hand at it, if you didn't think you liked it, you probably wouldn't like Bloodborne. Do you feel that way, Kevin? Because I don't personally, but that's kind of how they felt.
I think it sort of depends on what you didn't like, right? I mean, on one hand, okay, so let's say that you didn't like the overall structure. Like, you don't like having to like run to get to the boss because there's not a save point right there, or this game's not changing that really, or that you don't like the overall feel of the combat. Again, this isn't really going to change that for you. It's sort of built on the same structure, built on the same engine, that kind of thing. So a lot of the basics are still there. The fundamentals, sort of sit down at the bottom of things, buoying everything else up. But on the other hand, let's say you didn't like it because you didn't feel it was mobile enough, or you felt like this is pretty mobile what I'm looking at on the screen.
Mobile, you mean like...
Watch me die at the end of this.
Like nimble, like you
I'm
felt
going to
the Souls
die.
games were too plodding.
Yes, if you really wanted things to be mobile, like this helps that along. And enemies don't just stand in the same place. Like a lot of there are mobile enemies in Dark Souls and Demon Souls, but for the most part, they just kind of stand around waiting for you to trigger their AI,
right.
And then when that happens, then you engage. In this, enemies have some behaviors. They patrol.
They'll pursue maybe further than you expect.
Right, so the repetition is still there, and if that's something that you didn't like, if you were just basically against the entire idea of try and try again until you get it right or you're powerful enough to succeed, there's no real difference here. But the difference comes in the fact that it's not exactly the same every time, in the sense that this quartet of enemies might be in a different place because you're timing a little differently or something.
All right.
So I would say it's more accessible in the sense that it's got a story you can kind of better understand. It's maybe got a world that you can better relate to, but you still have to kind of forget what you know about other games coming into this and learn a new way of thinking and a new set of rules.
All right. Speaking of the world, just a real quick one. It looks like really gray and just black a lot when I look at footage of it.
Sometimes.
Do you guys feel that way playing it? Like, is it just like
it's
dull
dark. It's
colors?
meant to be dark.
Sure, but is there life in there?
It's
or-
ever changing.
But there's a thing that happens, okay? And I tried to avoid
All right,
us
all right,
putting
all right.
stuff
Let's
in the
not
footage.
Let's not get too far into there.
But there are things that happen. The world does change.
Okay.
And, then you might see some of the things you're looking for.
Does the changing help alleviate one of the main issues that you mentioned in your review and that people have been mentioning in the comments, the loading times?
No.
And the sort of frame rate.
I mean, the frame rate troubles aren't nearly on Dark Souls level. Like, Blighttown in Dark Souls was... I was very proud of something I wrote in the review, actually. There is a blight on this town. Hopefully somebody picked up on that. But anyway...
Right. That was really subtle, Kevin.
Thank you.
Not good.
But anyway, it's not... The frame rate stuff, not so bad. Occasionally, especially when you play co-op. That can kind of take a little bit of a hit when there's a lot going on. The load times, though...
The devs have come out, I think, and said that they're looking into the load times.
They're working on a patch.
Yeah, they are kind of long right now. I want to venture to say it's like 30 to 40 seconds.
Like every time you die? Or
every time
just
you
when
die.
You're traveling to Hub World?
Both.
Or?
I think I don't know, though. I feel like to Hunter's Dream is not that bad.
It's usually a little
but
quick because there's not as much to load in
load.
memory.
But Hunter's Dream,
So-
the Hub World to the main world, that's like a 30 to 40 seconds.
Okay.
Like every time.
So
it's
you
like
just
that
use that
Destiny
to like
factor almost.
do some meditative breathing.
Yeah, or
Maybe.
like
Okay, I'm gonna
use the
prepare myself.
bathroom, get some coffee, get a drink,
Time to go
stand
poop.
up,
It's
stretch,
another
maybe
Bloodborne.
You
do
guys
some jumping
you guys
jacks.
do all of these tasks with remarkable speed.
But
30 to 40 seconds.
I will say I don't think it would have been a big deal. Dark Souls 2, well, in Dark Souls 1 you could do this once you got a certain item. In Dark Souls 2 you could just do this from the beginning, which is like move from bonfire to bonfire. I think that would have, like that kind of system, if you could move from lamp to lamp, rather than having to go all the way back to the hub and then choose where you want to go, which is the same thing. There's just 2 steps instead of 1, right? Like, they could have alleviated that by not making me have to deal with 2 loading screens every time I wanted to go to a different area. They could have just, let me go from one lamp to the other. But that's sort of like a contributing factor. Like, maybe I wouldn't care about the loading time so much if you put in like this little thing that could have, mitigated the issue.
So wait for the patch or get Bloodborne now. It's a 9 out of 10.
Well, get it now.
Yeah.
Now for sure, because like even Giancarlo brought something up, right? Now is when everyone's experimenting And now's when everyone's going to have like the most excitement and the most kind of talking to each other about
totally.
like, this is how I'm doing it, this is how I'm doing it. And then you kind of get to bounce off ideas instead of like a month later, it's like, this is the de facto, you need to do this.
Yeah, everybody will figure out like where do you go to get to the secret area and the optional bosses and blah, blah, blah. This is the fun time when you get to kind of discover that. Later on, everybody's going to know there will be guides everywhere and whatever. So, do it now.
All right.
When the population's really high, you can co-op, you can PvP.
The population is high in Bloodborne. Kevin VanOrd, Eric Tay, thank you so much for coming on. Talking about that game, folks, be sure to read Kevin's review and watch it on GameSpot. And also, if you're looking to get started, we've got a bunch of tip videos and just quick little guides on ways to maneuver in Bloodborne for best success murder times up on the site. That's a technical term, right? Best success murder times.
Sounds good.
We do that.
Sure.
We can
Yeah,
trademark that, right?
That's about as sophisticated as your opening, Chris.
Yeah, well,
Yeah.
I'm a sophisticated guy, Kevin, obviously.
Yeah.
And coming up, folks, we're going to be talking about remasters, why there are so many. Like, there are really a lot these days. Why there's so many. Are they good? Are they bad? We'll be talking about that in just a second. But first, we're going to, I don't know, there's a trailer for something probably. All right.
The Lightbinder, a wise and noble warrior who regards life as a precious gift. Mastering the power of light, they protect their allies, shielding them from enemy attacks. But their kindness is not without limit. Directing their powers against an enemy, a Lightbinder is capable of inflicting massive damage at a significant distance. The Lightbinder's presence can shape the outcome of an entire battle. Using the ability Halo, they can protect entire groups from damage, or they can elect to surround an ally with unstable shield, negating incoming damage before detonating in a flash of light. With Blessing of Tenacity, a Lightbinder can dispel harmful effects cast on allies. Burning Stream produces a white-hot beam, piercing all enemies in a line. Starstorm strikes targets with orbs of compressed energy. Wrath of the Sun takes down any foe who ventures too close. And Merciful Blow finishes off weakened opponents by engulfing them in light. In tough battles, the Lightbinder can transform into a true embodiment of light, empowering nearby allies to inflict more damage and take less in turn. This class is perfect for those who enjoy playing support classes and prefer to control the battlefield. If an ally falls, the Lightbinder can use Enigma of Revival to resurrect them, returning them to the fight. Use light energy to dictate your own terms in battle.
Borderlands The Handsome Collection, Halo Master Chief Edition, Grim Fandango Remastered, Resident Evil Remastered. I have a lot more written down here, but God, there's a lot of remasters lately. What's the deal with that? Joining me on the couch to talk about that, I have Alexa Ray Correa, Peter Brown, and Justin Haywald. Hello, all.
Hey.
Hello.
Name some other remasters that I missed.
Final Fantasy Type 0
Devil May
HD.
Cry 4.
Okay, good.
Resident Evil HD. Did we say that?
I totally said that one, but it was not the right title. Anyways,
Well, I mean, you're saying a lot of remasters that serve different purposes. Like some remasters are, like Grim Fandango is something we hadn't seen in years, like decades. Like that was something that this is the first time that so many people got a chance to even experience this game. Whereas some games like Grand Theft Auto is technically a remaster of the 360 PS3 game, but that came out like last year.
so what purposes does a remaster serve? You named one, resurrecting a game that's from way far back, but that's
Or-
not what all of them do.
Or, like, Type 0 has never been released in North America, so HD was its first North American debut.
Reaching new audiences, be it in new regions or on new consoles. What else we got?
Finally, you take a game that came out for a system where developers are constantly pushing the system to the limits. On the next generation of consoles, and you have a remaster, they can finally take off some of those shackles, the game will perform better and look better, and maybe play better too.
Yeah, and we see a big difference between some remasters that really go all out, like that just completely, in some ways, redefine the world, or approach it in ways that were impossible on previous hardware. And then you also have some remasters where minimal amount of work is done, or re-releases. I guess you wouldn't call that a remaster. Earthbound is something that comes to mind, which hadn't been released in a long time, was put out on the Virtual Console. After a long absence, nothing additional is added. Like, it is just literally, here's the game on Nintendo's Virtual Console, a platform that lets you experience these older games in re-released form.
So the reason we're talking remasters is, Borderlands is out now. That includes a game that was, the pre-sequel came out in October, but it was actually only available for 360, PS3. Now it's on Xbox One, PS4. But God of War 3, going to be remastered for the PS4. Batman Arkham Asylum and Arkham City, rumored to be coming out by Christmas this year, with Arkham Knight coming out in the middle of this year. Now this is an interesting one because you're kind of, like, what does a remaster, what purpose does a remaster serve, and what risks does it run when you're working on the remaster of the game and a new edition of that in that series at the same time?
Well, a remaster can introduce a set, like Justin was saying, a generation of gamers that hadn't been exposed to it before, like Grim Fandango, and we're getting Day of the Tentacle soon. Same thing with the Metal Gear collection that came out, I think, last year, where it was all of them together. And that's great, but some of them, like you mentioned, the Borderlands Handsome Collection, and I think that's a cash grab because the pre-sequel came out last year for previous gen, and then we're getting it, what, 6 months later? Less than 6 months later? For current gen, and that to me feels kind of like shameless and gross.
Like, why didn't you just come out with it then?
Yeah.
Well, let's be honest, right? Like, publishers have demands when it comes to shipping a game. Perhaps those versions weren't ready. But I think it's also fair to say that not everyone plays every game that comes out all the time. Sometimes we miss those games. And especially when you have a generational shift for consoles, a lot of people put those old systems away. If they wanted to get into a game from the past, they have the option to do that on the current hardware versus the old one. So yeah, it's a cash grab because these games are money, right? That's why publishers fund games and release them. And I don't know that it's necessarily a bad thing. I think it's kind of giving people more options when it comes to their console of choice.
Exactly. A cash grab isn't necessarily a negative in this sense. Like, this is something that is helping fund these publishers, like, that they're getting new life in games that they spent years developing. And if you want more games in that series, that both shows the developer that you still care about this franchise, or that you're still willing to give it a chance. And then we can get a sequel because, well, they have an influx of money and they have the support of the fans who maybe didn't try it before, or maybe just want to experience it again right before that new iteration, that new version of it comes out.
And in terms of the resources devoted to, a remaster versus an entirely new game, you're talking about a whole different scale of operation.
Very different, because they're not redesigning the game. I mean, for the most part, what they are doing are taking old textures and updating them, perhaps having an engineer go in there and update some of the filters, not the filters, but the stuff behind the rendering tech, right? So it'll apply anti-aliasing, it'll upscale those the rendering frame buffer and stuff. So that could be a small team. And if it takes that small team to make that much more money to, like he's saying, support the future of a series or a publisher, I think that's a positive thing, if that's an option that people are willing to support.
Of course, that depends on if the remaster all goes well and is developed and launches properly. Of course, Halo, the Master Chief Collection, had its online woes, and we've seen other remasters that the aim is to improve technical prowess, but maybe it doesn't quite hit the mark.
And sometimes we want more. Like, I think one of the more recent examples of a remaster or an HD remake that disappointed so many people is Final Fantasy VII. Like, it's, a game that we've wanted for so long, and then they're announcing, here's Final Fantasy VII HD, and you keep waiting for those graphics to change to something that looks modern, and it never does. And like, it's the PC version that's slightly better looking.
Well, the amount of money that they would have to spend to and the resources that would go into completely remaking that is just.
That's any game. That you mean the resources they would have to spend to make any game for a modern console that's AAA. It doesn't matter that it's the remaking Final Fantasy VII. If they're going to make any game that's new and exciting, it's going to be as ambitious, if not more ambitious, than that game was nearly 20 years ago.
I don't know. I think the whole remaster thing is getting out of hand. Like, I think publishers need to trust that if they have someone out there who wants to play Final Fantasy VII until the end of days, that they'll keep the hardware for it. I know I do that. I know you guys do that.
Well, going back to I think, a point that Chris made, I'm actually really excited about some upcoming remasters because there are so many games that, especially because of our job, I just didn't have time to play, or they were on generations that, like, that kind of passed me by. Gears of War is not something that's announced. I assume, like, that has to be happening. There's been so many rumors for so long. And I actually kind of want that. I never played the Gears of War series, and playing it on, a next-gen console sounds pretty fun. Like, I can't imagine that would be bad. Master Chief Collection is another one. I missed so many of those Halo games. I'm looking forward to just playing through the entire series on a current-gen system. I don't have to keep my older systems plugged in. It's easier to access, and I know it looks better. I know it's supported, that it's going to look right. I mean, some of them have problems when they come out, like Master Chief Collection, but given enough time and the support of the fans who are behind it, like, those versions get to be better. Like, they can replace that in my library, so I don't have to have all these machines plugged in.
And again, having those old machines plugged in, you can get a copy of the game cheap and maybe play the older version of it, but you need the older machines plugged in. There was a time in this industry that backwards compatibility was a thing. It was like a brief shining moment, gone forevermore, it seems. Do you guys like remasters and backwards compatibility? Do you think publishers just saw that as sort of like, we're not making extra money off the backwards compatibility?
Yeah.
Here's ways we can.
I don't see it like that. I mean, that's got way more to do with a hardware code base issue than them saying, let's not do it that way, let's do it this way.
Let's hold on to it and charge it.
They would have to write so many different tools to take the language for one system to port it to another. In the case of going from PowerPC-based architecture of Xbox 360 and PS3 to the now x86 architecture of these new consoles, it's simply not financially feasible at that point.
I mean, you look at the solution for the original PS3 to get PS2 compatibility was to literally put PS2 architecture inside of the PlayStation 3. Yeah. It's like that. You're not making enough money for it, and enough people aren't using it to make that worthwhile. Whereas emulation or things like PlayStation Now, services like the Virtual Console that give you access to that back library, allow the developer to make some money off of it without losing all of that to use games, but still allow you to experience those games in a way that, for me, it doesn't clutter up my living room.
Do you guys think a remaster could ever be detrimental to a series?
I don't.
I mean, if it's bad.
If it's bad.
It depends if they're marketing it as something, completely redone and polished, and then you get something that's super janky, like Master Chief Collection, or I know in Borderlands, the Handsome Collection, the pre-sequel is incredibly janky to look at.
Oh yeah.
So
the frame,
I don't know.
especially when you get 4 players playing that, the frame rate can definitely suffer.
I guess you could sour goodwill.
Yeah.
It seems to be rare, but especially with the Master Chief Collection, like I definitely recognize where everyone was so hyped and then felt so burned.
And so, some of it also comes down to, do these games hold up? Like, nostalgia is such a powerful thing. Like, Grim Fandango is a game that I loved growing up, and like, I don't know if I want to try this again. And it definitely was harder going back. I mean, it's beautiful, and the writing is still amazing, but there's a lot that did not age well about that game. The really long animations, the traveling back and forth across the stage, like, those things don't hold up well in modern game design, even though the overall structure is great. And so it's like, this gives you a chance to go back and play these games, but sometimes taking the extra time to really remaster it instead of just kind of re-release it can give you a better experience than nostalgia will tell you was there.
Absolutely. All right, let's end on a positive note. Tell me some of your favorite remasters that you have either played or are looking forward to.
Easy. Shadow of the Colossus.
Shadow of the Colossus?
Yeah, it's a beautiful game, and just going from 480p to 10, or I don't know if it's 720 or 1080. Doesn't matter. That game was beautiful when it came out and was made even more beautiful by being remastered.
On the PlayStation 3 with the Team Ico collection?
Yes.
The Last of Us Remastered was, I mean, it was a wonderful game to begin with. It was wonderful revisiting again. But I would still call...
But it was like a year after the first one came out.
I'd call I have a really short memory.
Oh, goodness.
Grand Theft Auto 5 as well.
What about Majora's Mask?
Oh, no, that is my favorite.
Majora's Mask.
Majora's Mask.
Very good to play that again after so many years.
Oh, that was when I was so scared wasn't going to live up to my expectations, because that was my favorite Zelda game. Oh, and it did. It was so well done.
All right, any remaster announcement predictions for this year?
Uncharted Collection.
Uncharted Collection is, yeah.
We're going to get an Uncharted Collection. We're probably going to get... What are the big things this year that are coming out?
Uncharted Collection!
Everything!
Here's a good
Uncharted
thread.
Collection.
Let's look to console games that are also on PC. Because then there's a really good chance they're going to work with the architecture of the new consoles, which are pretty similar for the most part. I'm hoping for Metal Gear Rising: Revengeance. Because that got a PC release. That game is beautiful
they have
already.
to with that, yeah.
Yeah, and like if they can get that at 1080p, 60 frames per second, oof.
I think in the very near future, there's a good chance we're going to see Bloodborne HD.
Oh my god.
Right around the corner for the old Xbox One and PC. You heard it rumored here first, folks. All right, thank you guys for coming on, chatting remasters. There sure are a lot of them, and they are intriguing. All right, we've got a quick trailer for Dragon Age Inquisition DLC, and then it's back to the couch for an interview with Greg Johnson, creator of Toejam and Earl, and current head of Human Nature Studios, who's running a new Kickstarter for a new entry in the Cult Classic series.
"800 years ago, the last Inquisitor hunted a great dragon. Our search to find him has led us here.
We've encountered hostile Avar to the north. They call themselves the Jaws of Hakon.
Ages ago, the old Jaws of Hakon did the same. They brought their god to life to destroy the lowlands. Now they would free him and begin again.
Legend speaks of the last Inquisitor, who fought to save our lands from your god Hakon. It's time for me to do the same.
Blood will spill before the new moon.
Of winter, the cold wind of war. Join me in battle and die!
This beast will wreak devastation across Olay unless we stop it now.
Hey folks, Chris Waters here. Honored to. Hey there, folks. Chris Waters here. Honored to welcome Greg Johnson to the set, developer, creator of Toejam and Earl. Greg, thank you for joining us.
All right.
Hello.
Happy to be here.
Justin Haywald hanging out to chat about Toejam and Earl back in the groove, but this is the game you guys currently have on Kickstarter, trying to bring TJ&E back.
That's right. Well, we're trying.
Well, you're trying. You got a couple more days left. You're about $20,000 short, but
so is this a new game? Is for people that maybe haven't heard of Toejam and Earl, or this version of the game you're doing, is this a completely new adventure? Are you remaking the old game? What is this?
It is a new game, but it's very strongly based on the original game, Game 1, pulling in elements from Game 2 and Game 3. The whole idea behind it is sort of a nostalgia blast for all the TJ&E fans that have been asking for it for so many years.
Yeah, so that nostalgia, let's just do a quick little development history here.
Sure.
Toejam and Earl came out in 1991 for the Sega Genesis. It sort of attained this cult status. It wasn't like the #1 selling game for months and months on end, but it had this real big momentum and sort of really caught hold with folks.
Yeah, it actually didn't do very well at first. It was a very slow growth. In fact, Sega was looking at it initially and thought it might be a failure, which is why you probably heard the story, right? Why they asked us to kind of shift gears after maybe 3 months or so, and why we ended up going at right angles and doing a side-scrolling platformer instead.
Sure. So for the first game, it was sort of, you're exploring these big layered worlds cooperatively, but then the second game, you guys were working on a sequel, and then the publisher called you up and said, actually, like side-scrolling platformers are really hot right now? Can you please make that happen?
That's right. Well, that's kind of pretty much was the mainstay of the games they did in those days. You probably remember, right? That was the thing they knew how to sell, and they figured that it wasn't doing well because it wasn't that, and they said, can you give us a game with bigger characters and more action? And we thought, and still make it Toejam and Earl? Okay.
I guess
We'll try.
And then the same thing happened to you guys a decade later working on Toejam and Earl 3 for the Xbox. It was again harking back to the original format, but at that point, it wasn't 2D platformers that were the hot business, it was 3D.
Yeah, that's right. That was right around year 2000 when we started in on that. And that's when 3D, was all blocky and clunky, and the Xbox was just coming out, and Dreamcast, of course, is what we started making it on, and 3D was just starting to look good. And so that's what we went for, and we did start out to make a remake of Game 1. That was the plan. And, stacked levels and all of the same stuff that was in game 1, and then we got about, what, 3/4 of the way through? We were maybe,
3/4?
Yeah, we were
Oh,
mostly
man.
done. Right, we even had it on the Dreamcast so you could play online multiplayer, and we had all kinds of great stuff in there. The Dreamcast was a great machine, too. I really loved that version of the game. But yeah, then Sega got kind of nervous and started getting worried that it wouldn't appeal to new people and that it was too old school. So they asked us to get rid of the stacked levels, which is kind of why, you know, it's random, right? So you replay the game each time you play. It's different.
The layouts are all different.
Right, and you die, right? That was another old school thing they asked us to change, was like the permadeath thing where you die and then you start the game over again. They said, no, people don't do that anymore.
Permadeath is not going to be popular again for another 7 to 9 years.
Right. Yeah, so they said we want bosses, we want collectibles, and we want mini games and cinematic sequences and gates and keys.
Flashing back to like every Banjo-Kazooie clone to ever exist.
Yeah.
That whole operation, yeah.
Well,
it was an era, right?
Do you feel justified? I mean, especially now seeing so many, not necessarily remakes, but games that borrow from those sensibilities of older games, right? Things that come to mind immediately are like Shovel Knight, taking those old platform games, Axiom Verge, which is Super Metroid. Do you feel justified that like this is actually the kind of thing that people want?
Well, encouraged might be a better word, because I don't blame Sega for their decision at the time. In fact, we went along with it thinking, well, okay, you guys know better than we do, and we want to make a game that's successful, and if you really think that's what this needs to be, and it's your money on the line, okay.
All right.
It was hard, you know, but now, yeah, it is nice to see all that old stuff kind of coming back again, all those mechanics, and I'm feeling like, oh, all right, well, maybe we can really go back old school, and but I still wasn't sure, you know. I shopped this around to publishers over the years, and Mark Vorsanger too. You know, he was the original creator with me, but he kind of got out of the game business maybe 7 or 8 years ago.
Okay.
But yeah, they didn't bite and said, nah, the property's too old. We don't think there's enough of a demand. So I've been getting emails though constantly, and then you guys are probably very aware of the whole retro movement, right? And all of this nostalgia that's just been growing and growing over the last 4 or 5 years. So I've been getting this increasing demand, and now with Kickstarter, I thought, well, let's see. This will be a chance to really test the waters and see if that old school stuff is still what people want.
And we've seen some success with things like Wasteland, feeding off of people's nostalgia for those games that, aren't changed at all. It's the same formula, the same kind of art style. That these are things that at least a group of people want, but publishers aren't as willing to put money behind it, even though there is a demand.
Yeah, right. It is. It's understandably risky, I guess. But that's the wonderful thing about going indie and things like Kickstarter or Indiegogo. So we can just give it a shot and see what happens. And you even get to test the waters before you spend all that money and build the game. So I think that's pretty cool.
It seems like the indie game development is something that maybe over the past 10 years has become much more sort of part of the mainstream discussion of video games in general. But you've kind of been doing an independent game developer thing for a couple decades now. And
3 decades, yeah.
You basically lived the like horrible specter of any developer-publisher relationship, right? That you'd be doing your thing, and then they'd come in and say, not your thing, our thing, and you'd just say, okay. But then again, for making T-Genie Back in the Groove, you wanted to shop around to publishers and stuff like that. So I guess, how's your sort of perspective on working with publishers evolved or remained sort of the right perspective to keep you sort of optimistic about that?
Well, like anything, there's upsides and downsides, challenges in any direction you go. So I'm not a real big believer. Maybe I used to be in the grass is greener view, but it doesn't work out that way. So, I just had a really great publisher experience recently with Sony doing Doki Doki Universe.
Yeah.
You know that game, right? You interviewed me about that,
Absolutely.
right? And it's pretty bizarre.
And that game is not what I would say a publisher would look at and be like, oh yeah, this one's going off the shelves, no problem.
Exactly, right.
know?
Yeah, they were willing to take a risk, and they were very hands-off and just said, go for it. And there were even times when I was like, is it okay to put a talking toilet or put you on a flying poo? And, all this weird stuff. And they were like, sure,
go
it's
for
your
it.
game. So they're not, publishers aren't evil. In fact, I kind of feel like, I've seen transition, like you said, I'm an old guy. You didn't quite say that. But,
I mean, I'm diplomatic here, I like to think.
But, since 1981 when I started in the business, and EA was like 30 people, my first game was Starflight, right? And I've seen the industry change and grow over the years. And publishers have gotten a lot nicer, I think.
Really?
I mean, their legal departments are still aggressive,
Sure.
and they're very, very risk averse, especially as the number of dollars that they spend go up. They get more and more risk averse. But I think because the game industry has matured and people have now been in the industry for much longer, I just meet people, person after person in various publishers who have been doing it for a long time and want to make stuff that's meaningful, and just I'm always surprised at that. I shouldn't be, because it feels like in the old days it was a harsher world in dealing with publishers.
Do you think it's because both publishers, people working there are getting older, and the audience, like we are older gamers than when we were all starting out?
I think so. I think also it may be because in the last 5 to maybe even 10 years, maybe more like 5 to 8 years, the whole indie movement has grown up, and with first digital games, being downloaded, and then mobile games, and now sort of with crowdsourced funding, there's been just this increasing awareness of indie games and sort of innovation, and I think there's a growing appreciation for that. I know Sony has certainly embraced that, and I was talking to someone recently who was telling me that Microsoft is kind of, wanting to move in that direction too.
Yeah, they've got a whole Ideate at Xbox program that sort of mirrors Sony's own recent push into sort of indie development. Yeah. So would you say, like, indie developers, like, now's the time? Maybe when EA was 30 people, like, you maybe could get a job there, but now is a better time to sort of be an independent developer?
Yeah, that's a tough one, isn't it? It's a very mixed bag,
Yeah.
because there's a lot more opportunities out there now, and you can just you can make a game much cheaper with the tools available, and you can get money directly from like crowdsource funding. But because it's easier, there's a lot of competition too.
Yeah.
So, but it's definitely the path in. I get asked a lot, by a lot of young people, how can I get started in the industry? And, as opposed to sort of taking the QA route, or taking a real low-level job at a publisher and working your way up, or even getting a job at a big developer house, I usually say, if you can do it, build a game yourself first.
Download Unity, start working.
Yeah, right. And just it just shows so much initiative, and sort of it's a way to get
some attention.
Yeah.
All right, so Kickstarter is winding down. You've been at it about a month with Toejam Earl back in the groove.
Yeah, that's right.
Just a few days away from wrapping up. What has been what's sort of been an early, or I guess later, takeaway from running a Kickstarter campaign for trying to bring this back?
Oh my gosh!
I mean, I'm sure we could do an entire other interview on that, but like, give me one or two, like top level, like. Would you do it again? Would you go back to Kickstarter?
Yeah, it's funny. This is, I don't know how inappropriate this metaphor may or may not be, but it's kind of like having a baby. It's sort of like you don't ask a woman if she'll have another baby right before the baby's born. You got to wait a month or two, because it's intense. I have a lot of friends in the industry, and I'm lucky that way because I've been around a long time. Tim Schafer is one person who's clearly, been around the block as far as Kickstarter goes, and so I've been getting a lot of advice, and I was warned But man, I kind of should lie down on this couch because I think I might start a support group for people that do Kickstarters.
So
it's intense.
Key takeaway: lots of screaming, quite a bit of blood.
Yeah. Well, it's
Maybe
intense
the metaphor doesn't go that far.
Yeah, right. I got to shift gears now and change my mental image. It's intense, but a lot of that intensity is really good. Intensity is just a lot, you know.
Yeah.
So it's sort of like you open the floodgates, and now and all of a sudden you're talking to 2,000 people at once, and everybody is valid. You know, you want to listen to everybody because they're the people you're building for and you care about. And at the same time you're doing that, you're trying to, you know, write articles and do podcasts and figure out how you're going to get toys manufactured in China and your fulfillment center. You know, where are you going to go get that sent to? And everybody wants to know, do you make shirt sizes in, you know, 4XL and you know, just everything, but
Game
you know,
development.
It is. It's crazy. It's like a sprint, you know, for a month. I was going to say marathon, but you kind of run slow in a marathon, right?
Much faster pace.
Yeah. But there's some great resources out there now that have grown up, like some infrastructure. So we're working with this company in Texas called Amplifier, and they do manufacturing and fulfillment and customer service, and they ship everything out. And we're working with this other great company called BackerKit, and they collect all of the data from, oh, you've heard of them, you're nodding. Yeah.
I back way too many things
You
on
do?
Kickstarter.
Justin is a very avid Kickstarter.
Oh, cool. Yeah, it's becoming kind of the norm now, actually, so I'm not surprised. I'm actually more surprised when I hear people not doing that, because it's just, you know, unless your Kickstarter is very small, it's just too hard to handle, too much to handle on your own. So they're
amazing
great.
that the industry, you know, has expanded even to those sort of companies that support your Kickstarter campaign and stuff like that.
Yeah, isn't that funny?
It's a brave new
There's
world.
There's a whole infrastructure out there now.
All right.
I had one quick question.
Yeah.
A lot of developers, especially indie guys now, they get to design their games to be, you know, purposefully retro. But when I look at Toejam and Earl, like, I don't think anything screams 90s more than the design of those characters. Did you give any thought to like revamping it or to maybe changing it to make it more 2000s? 2015s?
Well, no, I'm glad you said that, actually, because that's the whole point. Yeah, and it is, I really wanted it. Maybe we even went too far, if that's possible. I don't know, but I looked for an artist, this guy Nathan Shorts, that does, his whole thing is sort of retro comics, and it's all about the, you know, I grew up child of the 70s, funk this and funk that, you know. I was in my high school, you know, people were carrying those boom boxes around their shoulder playing Lowrider and stuff, and yeah, I just thought it would be really fun for people, so we went for the, you know, the 2D sprites, and this sort of comic booky look, I mean the 90s sort of Schoolhouse Rock kind of look. So I wanted to do something that was fresh. I didn't want to just redo the same thing. So, and that's tricky, you know, when you do a sequel, because people want it the same, but they also want it different, and it's kind of this line you got to walk. So
tricky stuff.
Yeah,
Delving into the past, but making it fresh again.
Yeah, right.
Greg, thank you so much for coming on and talking.
You bet.
Toejam and Earl, back in the groove.
Yeah,
Just a few days left on Kickstarter, folks. Check it out if you're interested. Thanks for watching. All right. And that'll do it for our show today. Hopefully one of you guys won the headsets. We're going to be announcing that on Twitter a little bit later. Greg, thank you again so much for coming in and chatting
anytime.
about the game.
Fun.
I know that you're, you know, counting down the days, and it's
yeah, we're getting close.
Yeah,
I know, almost there.
Almost there.
Yeah,
again,
so close.
Best of luck to you. And Justin, thank you so much for
thanks for having me on.
Much appreciated.
It's always fun.
And thank you guys for watching. I'm Chris Waters. Lobby will be back next week at 2 p.m. Pacific with more games, more chat, and more games chat. We'll see you then.